The Shep Naz Podcast begins now.
Welcome to the Shep Naz Podcast. I'm Joe, and I'm your host today. And we are still at the M25 conference, and we're sitting at the house at Strawberry Hill. Welcome in, everybody. Yay! All right. Yesterday, we were telling you a little bit about the conference and some of the big sessions called the plenary sessions. And there was also throughout the day, there were workshops. So after we would have a big meeting in the morning, you could pick a workshop that you wanted to go to between then and lunch. And then after lunch, there was 2 more sessions that you could pick. Then we would stop for dinner, and then we would come back and we would have the evening sessions. So there was a lot of choices. In fact, I was amazed with the number of choices in the workshops. There was at least, multiple ones for every time that slot was available. Probably 25 different workshops. So that means like 75 per day, probably pretty close to it. So welcome back in, Pastor Ron.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here. It's been a good time. And so what we were wanting to do is kind of talk about the workshops. Everybody went to probably 5 or 6 different workshops, the whole thing. So anybody want to jump in with what your favorite one was?
Feel free.
Go ahead, Zachary.
I have my notes pulled up.
Oh, well, we'll start with you since yesterday we ended with you.
Would you look at that? Feels so special. So I went to one by a gentleman by the name of Jeff Stark called Insatiable Curiosity, A Compelling Approach in a Skeptical World. Awesome stuff. Like really, really good stuff. And a couple of things that really stuck out to me, he asked us some questions. Like the first one is, which is your one? Like we've been talking about that. Rob just did a message on that, like finding your one person that you're going to dedicate and pray for. But then he started asking some really intentional questions. And he said, what are 3 things you know about your one? And again, kind of like how I ended at the last one is like, this really is about a one-on-one individualistic kind of like getting into people's lives and getting to know them. And so like I had written my person's name down before he started asking these other questions, what are 3 things you know about them? In what ways should you know or don't know about your one that help you inform your posture of evangelism? That one really got me because I feel like for me, I don't want to say this if I'm just being honest, like I rely very heavily on my testimony when I'm evangelizing to people. Sure. Just because it's, so personal to me and how I, tell people like, here's how God changed my life. I don't know what you're going through. But it really convicted me because I'm like, not everybody has dealt with addiction. Not everybody has been in the same shoes. So yes, they might understand like, oh yeah, God can change even the worst of us. So he can change me and I'm not that bad. But to really have to shift our focus on the way we communicate to certain people, and that comes with getting to know them, which again goes back to like know them first, friend them first, and then evangelize to them. And the other thing, and then I'll end on this because I got 1,000 notes on this one. He says, people are not a project, they're your friend. And I mean, how many times in the church are we like, I'm going to get that person saved, and here's how I'm going to do it, and I'm going to tell everybody that I did that, and it's like we've made people projects, and like I don't know a nicer way to say that, but like we put numbers on people so that we can have a result in the end. And like, yes, we want to be able to measure successes, right, and measure growth, and that's important, but it shouldn't be the first thing, right? We want people to get to heaven. So if they are our friend, we should be compelled to give them the best news ever. And so I thought that was really important. They're not projects, they're your friends.
Yeah.
Thought that was good. Huge.
Yeah. Yeah, that came through in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
In every plenary session, in every workshop I was in, it was some of that. So, yeah. You want to talk? We went to one. You're going to talk about Dan Boone?
I think we should all talk about Dan Boone.
So yeah, Dan.
Everyone who went at least.
So those of you who don't know, Dan Boone is the president of Trevecca Nazarene University. He's an incredible speaker and writer, very great thinker. and he did a workshop called "Making the Gospel." What was it called?
So when you're ethical, well, you said
How do
he
we
changed
become
it,
good
but,
news people again?
well, but it was originally like when our ethical stances don't sound like good news, but
Yeah.
yeah, he changed it at the beginning, and he said, just when,
Yeah.
yeah.
At first, I thought he goes through all of his resources. I'm like, this is going to be very cerebral, but it wasn't. But
No.
it was very, very
Yeah.
good. And so I'll let you talk about it. I know you were in there too. You were in there, Brett. So you guys tell us about it.
Well, just going through my notes, I have right here, it says we begin to prioritize the people who are the most like us, and we start putting up the walls, and we tend to stay in our box. So anyway, his overall message was, it was just really powerful. That's the whole reason why I'm like, we should talk about Dan Boone, because, personally for me, I think still being newer in my faith, still navigating a lot of the different, trying to think of what the climates, culture. Yeah. But even within the church, we have division. And so it's not just even people who don't know Jesus, it's within the church. And so navigating that with people who I love and respect on both sides, how do you navigate that? How do you...
Well, tell us what the sides are first.
Yeah, so
So he
kind
talks
of
about two
mentioned...
theological veins.
Yeah, two theological things.
kinda
He
come on
said
sides.
it was one's mercy, right, and one is law and order. One is mercy. I
Mercy
believe
and grace.
Is that what you guys remember
Yeah.
him saying? I don't want to misquote. And so I have it somewhere in here, but essentially he was saying the importance of both. That God is both merciful and the law and order. Which, did he use a different word for law and order?
Wisdom and order.
Wisdom. That's
Yeah.
what it was.
Yeah, and so basically the sides are like you have these expectations from God
Mm-hmm.
that we in the church want to hold people to these expectations. And then there's this other side where, well, we just want to show people God's love and grace and mercy, so we kind of let them
They
slide
get
on.
hijacked, is what he
Yeah,
said.
so we
start
kinda-
hijacking the themes.
Yeah, so we don't hold them to the law. We're like, mercy is more important than the law. And what I liked is he started out by saying, you probably are going to think that I'm going to take the side of mercy and redemption. And if you thought that, you'd be wrong.
Right.
Because he said Jesus came to fulfill the law. But he goes, but Jesus also is full of grace.
Right.
So.
And I think that actually goes into, well, he gave like 4 application, and that's what I wrote down. And the first one is that every law is a covered promise. And I wrote this down, and that was from John Wesley. And so underneath everything God commands is something good God has for an individual. So I thought that was taking what so many people would deem as bad or bad news. I would say it like culturally, right? Like
Because
that
the
just-
law says don't do this,
Right.
you can't do that.
it is about love, right? Like it was just this message of, it is a promise of good, like,
Protection
Yes.
and provision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so the second one was that we would take more of a confessing posture in the world. And I don't know, maybe one of you guys want to speak to that one.
Yeah, I wrote some of them down. I'm also not going to talk about Dan Boone, by the way, so I'm going to segue. If we want to keep talking about him, we can. But some of the confessions.
Okay, well, never mind.
No. I'll stay with that. But
Yeah.
I have other points, so I don't know if we want to come back to me. But he said,
This is how it's been all weekend. Brianna does whatever she wants.
No.
you asked what we got out of the workshops, and I attended 4 others. So it says, so some of the confessions is we've let the government care more for the poor and immigrants than we do, which, yep. Don't patronize me. No, sorry.
That was from John
Inside joke,
Maxwell. Yeah.
We've mocked the hurting LGBTQ members in services, and we've demonized our enemies. And like that was super convicting, and yeah. So
Well, can I just finish
keep
the last
keep talking
points?
about Dan Boone.
The third point was taking discipleship more seriously. And I have in here multiple times, it's a slow process of come and see, but that we need deep disciples. And he was talking about the importance of that. And just, I think that's a common theme I've seen throughout, is that none of this is going to happen overnight. And it's not going to change in us overnight. And so, yeah, anyway, the fourth point, I don't want to take too much longer, but evangelism is more than a decision for Jesus. It ends in the baptistry, and we bring them into a community of people. We invite them into a community of people. And that we're in a world that is lonely, and that people really need that. But anyway, all that to say, one of my favorite things that he said was that he has total confidence in sin. He's like, I have complete, that was one of my favorite things that he's like.
But you might need to explain that.
Okay, well, yeah. Well, just in the culture, right? Like we can often, when things don't sound good, right, to other people, but what sin, we can be confident, which is like, I'm not going to explain this well, but I guess I should just speak from my perspective. It could be deceptive, right? If you think you're getting a no and you see somebody hurting over that no, right? And you think, oh, maybe this is not actually good for them. But if we know sin is, we have confidence that sin is not good, right? That there is nothing good that can come from sin. So there is no peace found within it. So we have confidence, right? That no matter how it looks, how much maybe they seem happy, right? But we know what is right or wrong. We can have confidence that they need to hear the truth.
Yeah.
But I say that with
he was kind
many
of
caution.
What he was saying is that I have great confidence in sin and that it does not have the power to deliver the life it promises.
Yes. Okay.
Because
There
it
you
makes
go.
all kinds of false promises, but it never delivers.
Right.
So it was a really good statement.
Yep.
So
Good. That was me wrapping up Dan Boone. Okay.
Anybody else got one from a workshop? Something?
I'm used to talking in a microphone. All right, so I was going to a lot of different kind of workshops than maybe what some of the other staff were, because I was looking for things that would apply in media and online ministry and tech and those kinds of things. I was very happy to see, though, that no matter how technical or how like you would seem like it was more cerebral, that every single one of them was ministry focused. And it was understanding that you could do certain things, but the whole purpose would be to still advance the kingdom. It wasn't just tech or innovation for the sake of tech or innovation. And one of the ones that I'll speak to is one that I went to earlier this afternoon, and would have thought that it was probably the most boring, but it was actually, to me, I was like, oh, there's a lot of untapped potential here. And it was talking about something that, our denomination has been steadily working on in the background for a long time now. In fact, the current person that's in that position has been there for 30 some years. And we have basically a research center. And, we do those denominational reports, and we know that churches have to fulfill their reporting obligations at the end of every fiscal year and things like that. And they do have all those stats, and Kevin knows all about it. And so there's a lot of that information. In fact, I found where we can download all of Shepherd's information from however far back we want to go. But it wasn't just that. It was tools to be able to look at how you can evangelize the area around you. And like the work that's been done into being able to take a look at what is the culture in your area right now? What is the diversity in your area right now? What is the kind of occupation and things that all these things that we could look at and find out what needs are so that we could better sharpen our ministry to hone in on not just what we think would be good for our area, but actually to be able to identify needs that are showing up statistically that we could address. So I thought that was really exciting. Also, some things that are way too deep to get into here, but the concept of a micro church where there are things that are more missional focused and ways that maybe we could motivate a small cell group to become missional focused, and then that turn back around and eventually bring them into some sort of worship setting instead of the conventional way of pulling people into the church, then getting them into a group, and then getting that group to go do something. It was like, let's just go get them to do something first, and then we'll make a group out of that, and then we'll get that group in. So I thought that was pretty exciting. Anyone else? Well, Nick
Brianna has some.
and Brianna.
Kind of going off. So I attended a workshop with Sam Barber, and he talked about discipleship and evangelism and kind of how they're inseparable, and sometimes the church separates them, and how they're really together. And he said discipleship happens before and after evangelism, and typically we see evangelism being first and then discipleship comes next. And kind of like the example he used is like with your children, right? So with your children, you take them to church and you're essentially discipling them from the moment they're born. Like you're singing like Jesus loves me, this I know. Like you're like teaching them these biblical truths before they accept Christ. And you know, it's like they use the funny analogy of like, you're not going to tell your kid like, oh yeah, you're not going to Sunday school, you haven't accepted Christ yet, we're going to go to church, you're going to stay home with the babysitter. You know, it's like, and we can't really approach evangelism like that. They're together. And so just a couple notes he shared, just like different applications. He mentioned how like Jesus was the kind of person that people liked, and like that really stuck with me. And we kind of dug into that, like why did people like Jesus? And it's like because he was friendly and he was welcoming to everybody. And this was really hard hitting. He said we've lost the art of reaching out to people outside of the church, and I think it's really easy for us like that are on staff and serving in ministry where we basically live at church. Like it's like our community's at church, we attend service for church, like our whole lives are at the church, that we can get kind of tunnel vision. And it's like we're so focused on the people within our ministry that we're not, we're not befriending people that aren't like us. And I think it's okay. There's that stigma. It's like, or what's that quote? Like, who your friends are, I'll show you. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I guess there is truth to that, but like Jesus befriended people that were nothing like him. And so where have we gone astray where we're like, oh, well, I can't hang out with them, they're sinners, or they aren't like me. And so learning like I need to get out and I need to make friends with people that aren't like me. Cause like, how are we gonna save souls unless, you know what I mean? Like I'm just hanging out with Christians. Like that's great. They're building me up. I'm building them up. But like, am I really saving people? Not really. Like I need to get out of the church, you know? So I thought that was good.
That reminded me of something that John Maxwell said earlier this evening. And he was talking about the fish. And he said, how many times are you going to clean the fish?
Yeah.
Just go fish, you know, go fish for more fish. But we are constantly cleaning the fish. And that was a great analogy to kind of back up that same concept. Nick, did you have some?
Yeah, I'll share a quick little thought. Noah and I, we decided to stick together pretty much through all the different workshops. We thought if we could put two both of our heads together, we.
That was mostly because Noah couldn't be trusted out in public, right?
Well, I wasn't gonna say that. No.
We didn't want him to get lost.
Didn't have his parents'
My mom
signature.
said I had to stay with you the whole time.
He signed a permission slip.
I took care of him. So we engaged in a lot of the workshops that were all about engaging your community in different creative ways, and honestly didn't come away with anything groundbreaking. Nothing like that I'd never heard or thought. Honestly, it was mostly an encouragement to what we're really already seeing and participating in our context there in Johnstown. Things like our food pantry and Youth for Christ and the school, other areas that are ministries already taking place, and we have plans and things like that in the works. So it was more just an encouragement. Hey, we're not to pat ourselves on the back, but just an encouragement. Hey, we're on to something here, and we're just really at the beginning stages of that community engagement in creative ways. Now we're pretty excited about what's to come. So.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest encouragement was some of the workshops we went to. We were already have started implementing in Johnstown, and after tonight, we were kind of just talking feel like we have it, but now we need to go. Now, this is we've done the kind of preparation, the work. Now's the time to kick it into gear almost.
I agree. I felt a lot of that throughout the week. Although there were certainly a lot of things I think that we all felt were challenging, especially in our personal ministry outside of the church, just how we're living out our faith on a day-to-day basis. But there was a lot of great confirmation, I felt, of the different things that we've really been focusing on in the church over the past couple years. And credit to Pastor Rob for listening to what God has been telling him. And it's being confirmed by what God is telling our denomination and what we're hearing being preached, because we're like, yeah, this is the right thing. Now, I don't think any of us felt like, oh, well, we don't need to do anything else because we're already doing it all right. In fact, I think it was like, okay, so we're started in the right direction, and now we just need to go more.
There was a session that the three of us went to. I could not tell you the name of it or who the guy was.
But you were very impressed.
I was engaged. No, but for real, because I was really excited because he was talking again, creative ways, but then tangible, tactical ways that we can bring people into the church and get them going in the right direction. And as he's saying, he's doing all these things, he's having people in the crowd raise their hand. One of them's like, all right, who in here is doing regular baptisms? And everybody's kind of oh yeah, we do regular baptisms. And he's like, perfect. So when you say regular, who in here does baptisms once a month? And the three of us were like, we just started doing that. No one else in that room raised their hand. And then the next question, who in this church is doing this? Raise their hands again. It was all these questions. He was like, if you're doing this is a good first step. This is a good first step. This is another step. And almost every single thing that he brought up, we were just oh yeah, we're doing that. We're doing that. And it was, I went up to him and talked to him afterward. And I'm like, dude, I came in here hoping to learn a ton. And though I did learn, it was more of a confirmation of Rob's vision and knowing that he's not just pulling this stuff out of a hat. Right? He's hearing the voice of God, and there's professionals out there teaching on this stuff and having no clue what we are as a church, was saying here's something you should do. Oh man, God already put that on our pastor's heart, and he's implemented it. It's not that we're just talking about it, we're doing it, and we're already seeing results from it. So it was a really cool confirmation of man, we got a great leader. Not trying to give you a big head, trust me, we'll humble you later. But
yeah, that's when we hit stop.
Right, exactly. Offline. But for real, so I don't know a better way to say it, but kudos to you, because you're truly listening to what God wants, and you're not just coming up with these cool programs and plans because they're cool.
Right.
You're actually listening to the voice of God, and this weekend for me was a really big confirmation of that. So
to jump on that a little bit, earlier there was a comment about who's your one. Don't tell anyone, because this hasn't been revealed yet.
No one listens to this,
No
so
one
you'll
listens
be all right.
anyhow. District Assembly is coming April 27, 28.
Yeah.
And we're working on a theme for Assembly. Who's your one? May sound very familiar when you come to District Assembly.
Nice.
So if that's not
And that all came before this conference, just saying.
Yes, it came before this conference, but that's another confirmation of God is at work and God speaking to multiple people in different ways. So I think that's pretty cool.
All right, we're about that time. Did you want to share anything, Brett?
Yeah, I can do something real quick. I'm sorry. Joe said we're at about that time, so that means I got about 45 seconds to go before he hits the button.
30.
You're good, but you're down to 15
Thank
now.
you, Brett.
Okay, I'm sorry. Here we go.
Appreciate you sharing.
So there was one of the workshops. It was actually the last one I attended that was really helpful for me, where the speaker was talking about like faithful interactions between the church and the community, and he said some things that I think take a lot of nerve to say, and kind of address some things that we do all the time in the church, and like inviting people, and like I'm guilty of this. Like as a pastor, Sundays are a very busy day for me, and so like if I invite a friend to church, I'm taking care of the kids. I'm a pastor to the kids, and it's like if I'm lucky enough that they do end up coming to church, they come, and they might come, and then they might leave. And so being intentional about how we're inviting people and also what we're inviting them into. He asked the question, like, are we giving people opportunities to know others and to be known? And if people are just coming to church, hearing and leaving, they are not knowing anyone and nobody is knowing them. If no word even comes out of their mouth except for good morning, I'm doing fine, and then they leave. Okay. And so just the opportunity that we can give people to really be known and join into a community is something that's really special. And he also talked about, like this is what I was saying, it takes a lot of nerve. He talked about what caring for people in our community looks like. Like he started with the question of what do people in your community think of when they think of your church? And like I think people might say like, yeah, Shepherd, they're a church that wants you to come to their church. And like, yeah, that's true. We do want you to come to our church. We have a message that we're extremely passionate about and got to tell you. And that's absolutely true. But there might be needs in our community that are not being met. And Christ calls us to care for those who are marginalized and those who go unnoticed and the widows and those who have lost things and those who are in need. And so, like, our church shouldn't just be like, we want you to come do things within this building, but we should be going out again, right? Like, chasing after the one. And it's an evangelism conference, so yeah, that makes sense. But, like, church is not just about, he said something along the lines of believing. Our evangelism isn't just trying to get people to believe the right things about God, but to have an interaction with the Holy Spirit, to spend time with the Father and to experience the love of Christ. And the church should be the prime demonstration of that. Like, if we're not living the love of Christ in the way that we interact with people, then what are we really doing? And, like, I might get in trouble with my other staff for saying this, but who cares if you even come to our church? You know, like, I want you to experience God's love and know that you are someone that is cared for. And if you come to our church, we're going to be happy to have you, because he said something like, the people that don't come to our church are just our family that, like, haven't come to our house yet, and something along those lines. But there's still people that we care about, and if they're just going to let us love on them, we'll be happy to do it. That was really good. So
Amen.
That was about 45 seconds, I think. So.
Yeah, pretty close to it. All right, well, we'll leave it there for today.
Pastorally speaking.
We still have more stuff to talk about from M25. Maybe you'll hear a Worship Wednesday edition of M25. And also, you can check out everything that's going on at the church by going to shepnaz.org and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. As we're talking about sharing our faith, anybody in this room that's talking right now would love to share their faith with you. And you can make a special request. Just email podcast@shepnaz.org and say, I want Zach to come share his faith, and he'll do it. For all these pastors, I'm Joe. Have a great day. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.